Okay, so I am Chef Shelley Clark from Kitchencue. What we do is we teach you to cook through a different lens. We teach you sort of the traditional way of learning how to cook, which is by technique. My mom sort of taught me how to cook, and her mom taught her how to cook. And those methods of cooking were basically technique-based. She'd say, okay, here's your pan, you're going to put the onions in, and maybe they didn't use like the perfect word like saute or caramelize or things like that, but it was a technique of you knew that you put the onions in and you softened them first and then you browned them to caramelize them. And you know, you have so little time to cook, but you want to eat healthy food, you want to feed your families really healthy. To do that, we think it's best that you understand how to cook by technique. So you can just come into your kitchen, whip out your saute pan, do the 6 steps of saute, and if you happen to have pork or you happen to have tofu or you happen to have salmon, it doesn't matter because you do the same 6 steps every time, you just vary the ingredients. I just thought we'd go over some of the basic knives, how to care for your knives and how to keep them sharp, how to hold the knife, your stance, how to use the knife, and then I'll demonstrate a couple of knife cuts. First off, this is a chef's knife, right? So this is a traditional chef's knife, and you see chef's knives now in lots of different shapes. You see the Santoku shape, which is more rectangular, if you will. It looks more like a mini cleaver. So a traditional chef's knife, though, has this little rocking edge and comes up to a tip. And this rocking edge helps you really use the knife in this traditional way that I'll show you on the cutting board by rocking back and forth. The Santoku knives are made a little bit more for just a basic cut, a flat cut on the cutting board. Chef's knives are made to be used in that rocking motion. It's nice to have a serrated knife that's shorter in the kitchen because you use a serrated knife not just for cutting bread, but for cutting anything that has any acid in it. So tomatoes, lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits. The acid in those fruits have a tendency to dull the edge of the blade of a traditional knife. So I like to use a serrated knife to cut those things just because it keeps my chef's knife nice and sharp. There's a couple of different kinds of boning knives. I put them in 2 categories, flexible and stiff. So you can tell by how easily the knife bends on the cutting board. This is a fairly stiff boning knife, which is better for meats where you have hard, tough bones, right, or chicken. The flexible tips are a little bit better for fish, salmon, trout, things like that, where you have to be a little bit more delicate and you're almost feeling your way, you know, through the fish. The knife is running along the bones, and so the thinner the blade, the nice flexible blade, you can feel those bones kind of through the knife. So a couple of different varieties there. And then lastly, a paring knife, which is a great knife to have on hand. You use it for usually things that you pare in your hand. We shouldn't be afraid of a sharp knife because we know that a sharp knife actually saves our fingers from being cut off as opposed to a dull knife, because with a dull knife you're going to be using more pressure to cut through something and you're going to really be working it, and then if that knife slips and it cuts you, there's a very big cut in your hand. Whereas if you have a sharp knife, it's a much easier cut. You're not using as much force. So a nice sharp knife not only is safer, but it makes the job in the kitchen a whole lot easier because you're not having to work so hard, right? So when you buy the knife, it should be nice and sharp. But every time you use your knife, you should put it on a steel and sharpen it and hone the edge. It's not really sharpening it when you put it on the steel. It's honing the edge. So you have a steel like this, and you take the knife. You want to make sure you go from end to tip for sure to get the entire blade honed. You start it at the heel of the knife. You're at an angle of about 18 degrees, which, like for those of us who aren't engineers, I would think about the fact that you could put a sharp pencil between the knife and the steel. Okay, so you can slip a sharp pencil in there. That's the angle we're looking for. And then you take, it's all in the wrist. Okay, so then you take the knife from the heel to the tip at that angle on each side. Sort of. You're going to try and get to the 18 degrees, but you're going to sharpen your knife at your own angles. You just want to make sure that you sharpen your knife each time, and it's at that same angle, and then you can test it and you can feel as to whether or not the blade of the knife sort of grabs your skin. You just need to touch it, and you should feel that it grabs your skin a little bit, and then that's a nice sharp knife. And then I usually wipe it off just in case, you know, to get any of those burrs off of there. And you can do that, you know, 3, 4, 5 times during the cooking process. And then to care for your knives, I always hand wash them. I don't stick them in the dishwasher, especially if there's wooden handles. But even if there's not, you don't want to put them in the dishwasher. So when we're using our knife, and we'll just start with the chef's knife because this is what we'll use most often, you want to think of the knife as an extension of your arm. So it's coming down in a straight line like this. And that's how you should be standing at your cutting board, at your station. Straight line, shoulders relaxed, right? Your knees are loose. You're not all stressed and tense. And you want to have a nice clean board, a nice clean surface to work on. So when you're chopping things, you move them from your board to a bowl or to a container that holds them, because you don't ever want to be down here with everything like loaded up on your board, already chopped and everything, and you're relegated to like this corner to try and finish chopping your garlic or whatever, because your knife posture isn't correct. And so the thing about the knife posture is, one, that it's just better ergonomically, but two, you won't cut your fingers off. So elbow kicked out, this middle finger, knuckle always on the blade, and you can have nice conversation with people because you know exactly where your knives and your fingers are, okay? So generally when you're cutting, the motion is away from you, okay? And the idea is that the tip of the knife never leaves the cutting board. You're cutting like this, your elbows are out, your fingers here are like in a claw holding the ingredient, and your knife never leaves the board, okay? Generally you're always cutting away from you like this, except for the few times when, like I'll show you how to cut an onion, when you're cutting an onion or doing something like that where you're cutting actually towards you. But 95, 96% of the cutting that you'll be doing is away from you. Even if with the cabbage, when you do have to lift your knife off the board because it's a big piece of cabbage, you're still always cutting away from you.